This is David Dubal, and I am proud to be talking to one of the great pianists on our planet. His name, Earl Wild. And Earl Wild, well, everything he does is always startlingly wonderful. He plays the piano like a god, no doubt about that, but he also programs which people want to hear. He is not interested just in the staid, the conservative. He takes chances, and of course, the year coming up, this one is so important in the world of Liszt, and I think that Earl Wild will be the first major musician to be doing anything worldwide on a grand scale for the 100th anniversary of the death of probably the greatest single executant musician that ever lived, Franz Liszt. Would you agree with that, Earl Wild?
Oh, yes. He was the greatest composer and musician and man who was in music after Beethoven.
Yes. The time is finally happening where the stature of this gigantic figure in 19th century music is getting his due. It's about time, isn't it?
Oh, I think so, because, so it's amazing. You hear so many people sometimes make remarks about his music as being technical and whatnot. Then you ask them if you've heard this or if you've heard that, and they haven't heard it.
Yes.
You see, they go by just a few of the lesser pieces.
Yes, and these lesser pieces have constantly been around, and they're fine, but they show nothing of this incredible output. The Liszt celebration that you'll be doing at Carnegie Hall, and let me, throughout this program, urge you to hear the real Liszt, the Liszt in his manifold character, the poet, Wednesday, February 12th, 8 p.m. The transcriber. This is where Liszt found the muscles of the piano, how he did what Saint-Saëns said was the greatest single revolution in the technique of an instrument. He did what no one ever else had done except Victor Hugo with the French language. And that's the transcriber, Wednesday, February 19th. And is that 1 week after? Wednesday,
yes,
Wednesday,
right.
And the third Wednesday, 3 in a row. That's very convenient. That's very excellent and easy to remember. Wednesday, February 26th at 8 p.m., we have Franz Liszt, the virtuoso. And on that program, he begins with the neglected but wondrous Polonaise number 2 in E major, the one Rachmaninoff played. And then one of the great works of the 19th century, the Liszt Sonata, 3 concert etudes, transcendental etudes, Hungarian rhapsodies. Earl Wild, this is a feast, and it's going to be one of the great, great happenings of this year. Tell me more about how you put them together and how nervous you must be, etc., etc.
Well, I tried to give a total picture of his works in his efforts in towards the piano and to advance the piano. And the more I worked in these things, the more admiration I had. Of course, I've been playing many of them for quite a few years. I would say almost 50 years. But they're 1/3 of the program that I'm playing, or almost a half, is rather new. For instance, I've never played the Beethoven First Symphony before.
Who has?
And so it was great. It gave me great pleasure to work on it. And I've enjoyed it so very much. And I wanted to do this while I'm still at the height of my powers, because this man has been sometimes denigrated by many people who really don't know his entire life work. So I wanted to put together something before I go that would honor him.
Oh, how touching! This is really a true celebration, and it's a celebration of your own debt to this incredible composer. He has given you so much.
Well, everything I have ever read about him, I've admired. And
even his faults.
Oh, his faults
were
glorious.
Were
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, and one of the marvelous things about him was that he, in his love life, which is always so discussed, he must have had a pen by the bed to continue writing. His love life wasn't all beautiful women. Many of the women that he loved were not very pretty, but they were all smart, and they all were well read, and so you have to give the man credit. He was simply wonderful in all of the aspects. He knew all the greatest theologians of the day, up to the Pope.
Yes,
and the greatest psychic experience he had was in a synagogue, and then he also knew every great writer, and he was cognizant of all the new works that came out and all the new thoughts and ideas, and then with all of that intellectual thing going on, so much of his music was inspired by nature, which is something which is totally missing today. Nature has become sort of a dirty word in music, like flowers and bees and things.
It's like, you see, he as a very mystical Catholic, he felt the deity, and nature was a part of it, and all of this now is unfashionable because it's difficult to speak of now in the late 20th century.
Yes, even in symphonic conductors very rarely speak in a poetical way to the orchestra. They don't describe what they want in poetic terms. They speak always in really down-to-earth, bland terms. They're rather embarrassed, and it's really a shame, because half the joy of life comes from that which is poetic.
How beautifully said, Earl Wild. Can you imagine, you who have taught many wonderful pianists, can you imagine not being descriptive in discussing with your students a Liszt work? I mean...
Oh, no, you have to be very poetic. Of course, you have to also be exactly the opposite. You have to have an ambivalence. But underneath it, the real thing is the poetry. And the rest is present-day language. And no one likes to indulge in that more than I do, because I love a good joke about the music, and I love to take a piece of music and tear it to shreds, make fun of every bar of it, and then say, now look, now that we've done that, look how really beautiful this is and how poetic, and all the things that I've said about it are only because of our present-day attitude. I said, now if you take it from this angle, look how beautiful it is. And you have to do that, because otherwise you'll be called an old fuddy-duddy. And but I enjoy doing that.
And
I do that with my friends. I haggle my friends to their face. I say all the terrible things. And when a friend of mine has a new composition played, I call them up and I read them the review before it comes out. And so that they're prepared for all the things that might be unpleasant. Half the things that we do in life, we have to prepare ourselves for the unpleasantries. Because if you're in music, as we both are, you have to be prepared for the most shocking statements and sentences that you read about yourself and what you're doing. So I prepare my friends and myself for all those things, and therefore you can have a good time.
Like Franz Liszt, Earl Wild is a wise man. I want to get back to Liszt the Poet, which will be February 12th at 8 o'clock at the famous Carnegie Hall. Let's just go down the program because it's so intriguing. You begin with none other than what?
Liebestrom.
And it still melts hearts. Can I say something like that? That something can melt a heart?
Of course, yes.
A work of art?
Yes. And I did it deliberately. I wanted to come out and hand them the piece that they all know and say, all right, we'll go from here.
Oh, that's the one piece they know.
So it's a wonderful opener, because it's like handing out some flowers and saying, now let's enjoy the rest.
Oh, wonderful. Then you certainly take them on an adventure, an epic adventure. In the second work, you go right into the unknown Liszt and one of his great pieces, and it's the Second Ballade.
That's such a wonderful piece. There are several different thoughts about the story of that ballade, but I consider it to be taken from The Prisoner of Chillon by Dumas, from the novel. And it's interesting to note that the opening of that sounds like a very turbulent. It's a turbulent beginning with a very mournful theme, and it represents to me the the emotional state of the prisoner in the dungeon. And the waves that you hear in the left hand are rather small because the castle of Chillon was on the edge of a lake. So you don't have oceanic waves, you have just small waves. And therefore, the whole attitude of the pieces, the opening should be that of something mournful and not so, it's like a storm on the ocean.
Mm. Well, you're whetting my musical ear. It will be followed by one of the masterpieces of his late years, Le Jeu d'eau à la Ville d'Este. That's a beautiful waterwork and inspired, oh my God, it inspired everyone. Debussy, Ravel. Mm.
It's
a specialty of yours.
Liszt wrote in his in a letter that he had difficulty sleeping at the Villa d'Este because of all the dripping water. It used to take him quite a few days to get used to the sound.
Can you imagine him in New York then, trying to sleep among the, or the hammerjacks, jackhammers or whatever they are
and
called?
And the fire trucks.
Mm-hmm. All day, all night, never ending. If they stopped building for 100 years in New York City, it would be perfect. Dante Sonata, oh my God, that is the Byronic, the Dante-esque, the depth and the religion and the eroticism all mixed together, isn't it?
Oh, it's wonderful. Yes, it's all of the madness of religion.
Mm. This program, as I go down, I see it's getting more and more incredible. Then the Funerai, and then the 3 sonnets of Liszt, the Petrarca sonnets.
Yes, the Petrarca sonnets.
And finally, a little valse oubliée. And not to mention the last work. And only you seem to play the Mephisto Polka, a wonderful piece.
Well, the Mephisto Polka was written almost at the end of his life, just in the last, I think, 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's dedicated to one of his very, very beautiful lady friends named Lena Schmalhausen, who was very devoted to Liszt to the last day. And he dedicated this piece to her. And it's so wonderful because it's visionary again.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It could have been an earlier Prokofiev piece.
Yes, it's amazing. And then you end the program with the famous Mephisto waltz itself. Mm.
Yes, I've always liked that the number 1 waltz. I think is the best one.
That's the Dance in the Village Inn.
Yes.
Well, that's The Poet, Wednesday, February 12th at 8 p.m. at Carnegie Hall, Earl Wild, celebration of Liszt. And now, because we're going to have so much Liszt, I do not want us to hear any Liszt now. I want to tantalize us right to the gate. And that is, we're going to begin with Beethoven. This is from a new recording?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, it's my first Beethoven recording of 2 sonatas, Opus 31, number 3, and Opus 22. And they are not released. They won't be released to the public for another month or 2. But
what's the label?
A preview. Del Arte Records.
Oh,
English.
Del Arte.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And we'll be able to get them here easily?
Yes.
Tower Records?
Oh, yes.
Good. All right, we're going to hear the first movement of Opus 22 in B-flat. I would say it was written around 1801. Beethoven himself was extremely pleased with it and asked the publisher to give him the maximum amount of money for it. So let's hear this movement, which I love. Beethoven Sonata, Earl Wild, the artist. Sonata in B-flat, Beethoven, the first movement of that, and the artist Earl Wild, and that is going to be on his new album of two Beethoven sonatas, which come out soon on Del Arte.
Del Arte, yes.
And we'll be looking forward to that, and we'll be programming that within our regular format. Earl, I have to take a break for a commercial or two, and then we'll be back and continue our discussion on not Beethoven, but Liszt, where you will be doing a 3-recital Wednesday evening in February for Liszt's, all of Liszt's music that, well, let's talk about it soon. David Dubal is back, and I'm with Earl Wild. Well, we went through the programming of Liszt the Poet, which is the 12th, which is in a few days from now. The Poet, now you go to the Transcriber. Now that's an area where for so long Liszt was just shot down, and yet now we know that what he did for the piano within these transcriptions was absolutely amazing. Can you talk about Liszt the Transcriber and this program?
Yes. Well, Liszt was, as we all know, he was very cognizant of the material he worked with. And if there was no musician that he had greater respect for than Beethoven. So when he transcribed his symphonies, he did it with that total respect and that love of the music. He wanted others to share it with him. And he referred to himself in the same class as an engraver. And it was a beautiful statement, the preface to these symphonies. And also his Bach transcriptions are so wonderful because he didn't tamper very much with the Bach. Fact is, most of them are not touched at all. They are only transcribed in the fact that some of the bass notes are doubled. But the transcription that I'm playing of the Fantasia and Fugue is a little more decorative, especially the Fantasia. The Fugue, he doesn't tamper with at all. The I don't like the word tamper. I shouldn't say that. He doesn't, shall we say, expand. But the Fantasia is real piano writing, and I love them. The fugues, the Bach fugues, organ fugues on the piano because they're so clear, and that pleases me because you hear everything. And also, it's amazing in the Beethoven symphonies, the clarification of things that you've been listening to in the orchestra that have never been quite clear due to the actual placement of the instruments.
That's so interesting, and I'm going to be hearing the C major, Opus 21. How did you decide to program number 1?
Well, I had played through all of them, many times in my life, read through them, I would say. No, I didn't perform them. But number 1 struck me as being so very Haydn-esque, and it was like a piano sonata. And there wasn't any of the elaborations or things devices that Beethoven used that were far out as far as the piano would be concerned. And so I thought it would be best to keep it within that range of sensibility, and it sounds really nice on the piano. I love the way it sounds.
Oh, how wonderful. Now, after that, a stroke of genius. You move right from this early Beethoven symphony to the duet, or the Rigoletto paraphrase, the quartet from Rigoletto. That's one of his most beautiful transcriptions. It's almost impressionistic the way he handles the piano in some ways.
Well, it's wonderful to see the decorative idea in it, as you say, and it just the melody emerges and the decoration doesn't interfere with it, but it enhances it, and it's very amusing also.
Yes.
And sometimes it can be almost witty because the actual words to the are rather sad. With Gilda and the English translation is very amusing, and so you have to keep thinking in Italian so that you aren't too amused by the translation.
That's wonderful. And then back to German Romanticism and Liszt's fabulous transcription of 2 Schumann songs, Windmung and the Frühlingsnacht, the Spring Night. Schumann did not really, in all ways, appreciate Liszt. Of course, he had died in 1856, and Liszt lived on until 1886.
Well, I think Schumann appreciated him, but Clara didn't, and he had to follow Clara, or whatever she did. That was the law. There
was dissonance there, I think, and she provided, even though she was the person that he dedicated the Paganini etudes to.
The dedications of all the music, I've never gone into the exact dates of them, but there were so many emotional scenes going on all the time, and Clara was constantly making dreadful statements. Like she even made statements that Brahms' music had too much bass in it, and things like this. Clara wasn't a big talent. She was a minor talent, but she had big ideas.
Yes.
And she wanted Robert to be famous beyond anything. And when he failed because of his health, she didn't take that lightly. She took it as a personal offense.
Yes.
And so anybody who... And then after all, Liszt had dedicated his greatest work to Schumann, and Schumann had dedicated his Fantasy to Liszt, which was one of his greatest works. And I think there was such a jealousy and whatnot at that time among all of these people. You know, we always look at them with such a Valentine cover, and when it really wasn't so, because they're just like we were. They were all struggling and trying, and there was such a thing going on all the time.
They were people.
Yes,
they were
right.
human. Clara said that about Liszt that he has he has the conscience of the decline of piano playing on his hands. And then he one day said, "Well, if you want to hear Schumann the way he should not be played, listen to Clara." So it went back and forth. Well, from these two wonderful songs of Schumann-Liszt, you go to the Chopin-Liszt, My Joys, and then to Liszt's own song transcribed by him, the Lorelei, and then a Wagner-Liszt from Flying Dutchman, right? The famous spinning song. And then the Grand Etudes of Paganini. Well, that is absolutely startling, the range right there that you have of Liszt the transcriber. That will be Wednesday the 19th. Earl Wild is my guest, and we are going to hear him now in a little tidbit. We just heard the serious Beethoven Opus 22, and now I want to hear very much, if you do, the Rimsky-Korsakov Flight of the Bumblebee in 1 minute and 11 seconds. It should not be even 1 second faster, you know. Flight of the Bumblebee, Rimsky-Korsakov, the Rachmaninoff transcription, the pianist Earl Wild from his now famous Carnegie Hall recital, which has been immortalized on audiophile. Is that right? Or audiophone?
Fine.
And it's an audiophile pressing.
Yes.
And it's 2008-2. It's a 2-record set, and it has... well, it's called The Art of the Transcription, and I was at that recital, and it caused a sensation. Absolutely. Well, it can now be had, and we're going to be hearing more of this album in a minute, but we're going to get back to the fact that if you want to hear a Liszt transcription is on my brain, Earl, a Liszt celebration, call, is it called Carnegie Charge? Yes. It's at 212-247-7800, or go to the box office and buy tickets to the 3, 2, or at least 1 of the 3 Liszt programs at Carnegie Hall. I know that there are hundreds of pianists flying in from all over the globe just to make sure that they hear you in Transcendental Etudes and Mephisto waltzes. Did you know that?
I don't know. I never know.
One never knows what will happen when you go out there. Will there be... Did you ever have this nightmare that no one would come?
Oh, yes. It was interesting about transcriptions. You know, many people... I played in Minneapolis the other evening, a transcription program, and I was worried about whether there would be an audience, and it was full, and they were very enthusiastic. People come to concerts to hear transcriptions that don't go to other concerts because so few people play them, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wonderful, the effort that's made in their behalf.
Oh, that's wonderful, because this is now such a cult society, actually, that you can, at one time, there would be, if you played a transcription, they would say, how dare you? I mean, play the real Bach or the whatever. But today you can actually have an audience come just for the transcription. It's wonderful.
Well, I think that people are becoming more cognizant of the fact that so many people made transcriptions. And, you know, life is a transcription. We're transcriptions of our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And music is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not uptight about any of that sort of thing. And I think when music finally loosens a little more, it's starting now, when it loosens a little more its attitude, that people will go to concerts again, recitals, because the audience has dwindled in the last 20 years, and it has to be rebuilt by the younger pianists.
Yes, and the younger pianists have to rebuild it by not just playing the Waldstein every day.
That's right. I know. I lived in Palm Springs and for 10 years, and there was a very famous pianist came, and he played 3 sonatas. And before he could get off the stage, the pause had stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And it was rather a sad thing, because musicians mustn't think that every audience they play for is totally educated. Fact is, in almost every audience that you appear before, there's certainly a large group of people there who have never heard a piece like the Moonlight Sonata played in person.
Yes, and we take it for granted that this
Yes.
is hackneyed, and we say, oh my goodness, we can't dare play it. And it's not hackneyed to the general public, just to some musicians.
That's right, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, you are certainly not doing any hackneyization here in your Liszt celebration. And we're going to now give one tidbit of the Liszt from the transcriber, because we are going to play from your recording of that beautiful Chopin song, My Joys. That is an exquisite piece, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, we're ready. Earl Wild is the pianist, and it's from that live Carnegie Hall called The Art of the Transcription. My Joys, Chopin-Liszt, and the artist, celebrated pianist Earl Wild, who was playing at Carnegie Hall Wednesday the 12th, Wednesday the 19th, and Wednesday the 26th. 3 monumental Liszt programs. And I suppose, Earl, that these are for the 100th anniversary of his death, I guess.
Oh, yes.
This is your...
That's my tribute to him.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that yours will be the first major tribute through the year. What I fear is that everyone thinks that there's going to be so much Liszt that they don't do enough.
I don't think so. I haven't seen that many festivals arranged, although I must say that the Liszt Society always pays great attention to that sort of thing. And I know that in Washington they're having a festival, I believe it is in the late spring or summer, at the Smithsonian Institute. So that should be interesting. And I think there will be various and sundry programs. But I think my 3 programs cover so much of his work. I was only sorry that it couldn't have been arranged to have orchestral performances along with the piano recitals.
How wonderful.
But
Well, you could
difficult.
conduct that because you conduct. And we should also say that you are an expert composer. Not only a transcriber, but you have done oratorios. And tell me a little bit about that.
You know, I don't consider myself now a composer because when the although I have written some big works, when the serial music became popular, I was so turned off that I was so disheartened by this. I shouldn't have been.
Of course, it's over with now.
Yes.
Now you're in fashion if
Yes,
you wanted to
but
compose again.
That's when I devoted myself. I stopped conducting and I stopped everything except the piano because I had to come to a point where I would choose what I was going to do, because you cannot play in a first-class fashion and conduct in a first-class fashion and compose in a first-class fashion. So you have to choose what you're going to do. So I chose to become a better pianist. And that's what I've stuck with ever since the 60s, early 60s. For better or worse, that's what I do. And although I must say I do transcriptions now, and I occasionally write something short, for therapy, to keep from being so tied up with the practicing and whatnot that it destroys your imagination. So the other parts keep me alive, and I can't imagine not doing all 3 of them. But I don't push the composition thing because composition at this moment is in such a dreadful state. No one knows what they want to hear. The critics review pieces that they don't understand and say that they're wonderful. And I can't bear minimalism. And I don't even think it's amusing. I saw it all in the WPA projects in the 30s. And so it's rather annoying to me to see it repeated again while I'm still alive. I wish they would wait till I was gone.
Earl Wild is my guest, and we're talking about various subjects, the most important one being that he will be playing 3 Liszt recitals in February, and the first one in a few days, February 12th at 8 p.m. That's the Poet Liszt, and the Transcriber on the 19th of February, and then the 26th, the Virtuoso Liszt, and that has on it the B minor sonata itself, which is one of the culminations of his art.
Well, I love the B minor sonata, and it's been a life work because it's one of those pieces that in order to see it from beginning to end, to its last note, you have to look at it in retrospect. You can't just pick up this piece, learn it, and play it. So the longer you keep looking at it and playing it, the more cognizant you become of the shape and the places that should be given a little more attention, and the places that should be allowed to move, because it's so intense all the time that there's a desire always to make the most of everything, and it's like somebody who loves you too much, they can kill you with it.
I understand that. How do you sustain this incredible love for the literature? It never fails you. Whenever I talk to you, there's always this depth of enthusiasm about the works you're playing. Well,
it's not only the works I play, but I go to a lot of concerts too. I like music in general, and it's just part of my life. I started out like that. That's all there ever was, and there was nothing else. Mm-hmm. And it sustained me through all the difficult times. And I drowned out my family's quarreling with my practicing. Mm-hmm. And when things would become very difficult, and there would be a terrible thing happen in life, like the death of someone you liked or loved, or music would carry you through. Mm-hmm. And it was a focusing point. Mm-hmm. It was like having a marvelous crystal ball. Mm. And also, it keeps your mind very open. Anything like this, as you know, I don't have to tell you. And if you have any psychic tendencies, it allows them to come through. Otherwise, you can go through life without really ever being very open-minded, and you can be very tense. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm known sometimes for having a very sharp tongue, but most of that comes from an observance that's humorous.
Yes.
And if you're a friend of mine, you really sometimes get it. Mm-hmm. And because to people who are not my friends, I never say anything like that. I'm always very polite.
Well, I think that it's an honor then to get it from you. And I hope you are working on your memoirs, because so many things have happened to you. So many interesting people have come into your life. And
well, I've read so many books, like, mm-hmm. for instance, about people like Toscanini, by people who didn't know them, or people who were forced to lie on the floor doing rehearsals because he didn't want to see anybody in the hall. And I read all these books, and what I read and what I know of having spent about 8 years with him are two different things. Mm. That's also with Paul Whiteman and many, many names like this. So I am working on it now. I hope by the end of next year that I will have it more or less finished and ready.
Oh, wonderful.
Because if nothing else, it will be amusing and sometimes deadly serious.
Mm-hmm. Well, the memoirs of Earl Wild will be something I will definitely look forward to. And we're going to hear the transcriber, not you playing another person transcribing, but your own transcription of the Padakatra from the Swan Lake of Tchaikovsky. It's 1 minute and 28 seconds, and it was on your famous Carnegie Hall, The Art of the Transcription recital. Do you want to hear it?
Yes.
Okay. Earl Wild in his own transcription from Swan Lake. That was a live recital, 1981-82 season. In fact, it was November 1st at 3 o'clock, and every pianist, I believe, in the Western world was there to hear the dazzling technique that you have. And in this remarkable in a way, Earl, you gave credence to the possibility of other pianists not being intimidated by playing transcriptions. Your own prestige gave other people courage, and you have definitely must have noted that there's been many more transcriptions on programs since you.
Well, I did that program with that in mind, because I certainly didn't do it as an example of the greatest music, etc. But I did I did it because I enjoy it, and because some of the things are very beautiful. And you have to be able to play it. So that pleased me personally, and that's not being conceited because you have to work so much for it.
Yes.
And I hope that it would release the tension around those things, because at that concert there were more musicians in my audience than any of the other very serious concerts which I've given.
Well, it was a turbulent day, because I remember that you played at 3:00,
Yes.
and also Horowitz was playing at the Met, I believe.
Yes.
And people were oh my God, I'm going to miss Horowitz, or then if they went to that, I'm going to miss the Earl Wild, and many wanted to get both in somehow. And
I would have liked to have gone to Horowitz's recital.
well, I know from my own personal contact with Horowitz that he would have liked to have gone to your recital. In fact, to say the least, thinks very highly of you. So I think that, who knows, maybe Horowitz will show up to one of the celebration concerts.
I would be flattered.
Well, he showed more than an interest. February 12th, February 19th, and February 26th, the first major Liszt celebration of the season for the 100th anniversary of the great master's death. And to get tickets to one, two, or all of these, call the Carnegie charge at 247-7800, or go to the box office, and the tickets are extremely reasonably priced, and you will have a chance to see a spectrum of Liszt. No longer will you be able to say, I don't like Liszt, he only is tinsely or something, huh?
That's right.
Yeah, it'll be a very different thing. Now we are going to not hear Liszt, because that's the way we do things here. We're going to hear from Earl Wild's new Beethoven Sonata album, the first Beethoven's album you have made in your tremendous career, where you have perhaps a larger discography than anyone. It includes 250 solo piano pieces. My God.
Yes,
Incredible.
When I look back, I wonder where the time is to do them.
31 concerti.
Yes.
14 chamber works. I mean, you've recorded Walter Piston.
Yes.
I mean, it's unbelievable what you have done in your career. Well, let's hear the first movement only, alas, of Opus 31, number 3, in E flat. great pianist Earl Wild in the Beethoven Sonata Opus 31, number 3, the first movement. Earl Wild has been with me discussing his Liszt celebration, which will happen Wednesday, February 12th at 8 p.m., and that's Liszt the Poet. The Transcriber will be played, a wonderful program on the 19th, and then the Virtuoso. Each of these are titles for these monumental programs that will happen at Carnegie Hall. Center charge 247-7800. Don't miss these programs. They're among the most important that Carnegie Hall will be putting on this season. Earl Wild, it's been, as always, so nice talking to you.
And to you, David. Thank you.
This is David Dubal. Thank you for listening.